to talk about the human toll and kind of give us a sense of what the why is here, why this has happened, because there was a touch point, there was a flash point. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened. So, Dr. Grills, you're joining us now. Can you talk to us about kind of the elements of race relations and the experience of racism in this country that informs what this response, this cataclysmic response, has been?
Thank you for inviting me to speak with you this evening. You know, these are very, very difficult and trying times for people of African ancestry in this country, and in fact in the world. We Black folks have been essentially dealing with centuries of racial oppression. Our souls, our bodies, our minds are under duress. We are in a broken social system and society. And as Dr. King put it, in 1968, he did an address to the American Psychological Association. And he said, what has penetrated substantially all strata of Negro life is the revolutionary idea that the philosophy and morals of the dominant white society are not holy or sacred, but in all too many respects are degenerate and profane. So essentially what we're dealing with is a situation that is not righteous, it's not just, it has no empathy or compassion for the humanity of Black people. And in the midst of yet another assault and reminder that we are seen as less than human, we're then being called on to rise above the situation. So the question I would have people answer for me as I look at what's happening in the streets of Los Angeles and across this country is, what shall you have us do? While no one likes or wants or necessarily supports the kind of unrest that we are seeing right now, what would you have us do? What's the solution, right? Appeal to fairness, justice, and morality? We tried that. Voting? We've tried that again and again. Litigation? Done that. Legislation? Done that too. Nonviolent marches and protests? We've done that. Pray? We do a lot of that. Cry? We've done even more of that. So where have these things gotten us? What would you have us do? The broken social contract becomes too glaring and the pot boileth over. So we can no longer adjust ourselves to the dehumanizing and suffocating weight of racial oppression. What would you have us do?
I remember, we can all remember when Colin Kaepernick, the now former NFL quarterback, because his career ended after this pretty much, was taking a knee. And he was roundly criticized doing that. He would take a knee during the national anthem as a response to the way police officers all too often treat African American people. He was criticized. The President of the United States called him an SOB. But then now we find ourselves in this situation where literally someone is kneeling on the neck of a Black man. And so how does what he did seem so terribly awful when you look at the way things have been going?
Well, what Kaepernick did wasn't awful at all. He was exercising the right that we're all supposed to have in this society. But Victor Hugo actually said something once. He said, if a soul is left in darkness, sins will be committed. The guilty one is not he who commits the sin, but he who causes the darkness. We keep focusing on what's happening in the street. I want us to flip the script and look at what's been happening in the halls of justice. What's been happening in the Supreme Court? What's been happening in Congress? What has been happening in the White House? What has been happening in state governments, local, county, city, state governments in this country? we keep repeating this narrative here. We keep repeating this drama, and it's not going away with lip service to really redressing the wrongs that have been done or continuing to be done in this society. It boggles my mind, and it's tiresome for us as Black people because we keep seeing lip service to what we're doing, and we don't understand how. Like, I'm looking at this picture right now of the police with their guns and the fire trucks and the folks in the street. And what we seem to fail to understand is that at the end of the day, we are human beings. Human beings have a wiring in our system, right? That when you stress us beyond our ability to cope, we're going to go into a reaction that is wired in our nervous system. We're going to fight. We're going to go into flight. We're going to freeze. We're going to appease. But when you're backed up against the wall, you're in a point of you're facing the predator, and your very existence is under assault. Then you're going to go into fight mode or flight. We can't run anywhere. And so people are out there in the streets and they're saying, I can't take this anymore. This needs to stop, right? But then you bring in the very mechanisms that further trigger the stress response, which is the police. And then you get more stress reaction. And then you ask, why are people acting this way? It's because you pushed people up against the wall. What are we supposed to do?
How did we get here in the year 2020 with so much knowledge that we have now, and we don't learn from lessons, and that we can base and judge people just by the amount of melanin in their skin? How did we get to a place like this in 2020?
That's an excellent question. And I would suggest that we got here because we never dealt with it. We have not dealt with America's original sin. We don't teach the truth about America. We don't help people to understand that we live in a racialized society. And even though I'm a psychologist, I spend a considerable amount of my time studying history. Because if you study history, everything that's going on today, you see that it has its roots in our inability as a society to have the race conversation, and then to move beyond the conversation and do what needs to be done to equal the playing field. I would encourage folks, if you haven't read it already, a quick history lesson, go and read Frederick Douglass's autobiography. If you read that autobiography, you see everything that people are doing today in terms of their reactions described in his experience of enslavement in the United States back in that era. Literally everything that we're dealing with now, you see its precursors. So if we don't start telling the truth, if we don't start teaching our children the truth, if we don't start understanding what we don't know, if we don't realize that we are all bathing in ignorance because we are being socialized into a narrative of the great America, then we're going to see this happen again and again and again.
One thing that I have found frustrating is, we do a story like this, or we do a story about somebody who has died in police custody, and inevitably, especially on social media, you'll have the people who will comment saying that, this person was resisting arrest, he got what he deserved. This person ran from the police, he got what he deserved. This person, whatever it is, they got what they deserved. And for one thing, the video, everything supports the idea that George Floyd was not resisting. He did not resist. So many of the other people who've been involved, especially in the last few weeks, were not, Breonna Taylor was in her apartment playing video games, hanging out, and was shot and killed. Chris Cooper in Central Park asked a lady to leash her dog, and she was ready to unleash the police on him. And so, those who say, teach your kids to comply, teach your kids to comply with police orders and they won't get into any trouble, that's just not true.
No, it's not. It's absolutely not true. And so, as you were describing that, what comes to mind for me is the fact that we have to recognize that there's a root cause of some of these problems that is going to be a very, very difficult conversation for America to have. And that conversation involves the idea that we are dealing with a mindset and a narrative that is absolutely deadly for Black folks. And that mindset involves the lie of Black inferiority and the lie of white superiority. That lie underlies the often unconscious biases that we see perpetrated against people of African ancestry. It leads to discrimination against us in every arena of life, including policing and the use of deadly force. It causes psychological harm and emotional damage to Black folks. It deflects attention and energy away from the real work of social justice. Until we deal with that, no matter what legislation we do, no matter what kind of litigation we do, no matter how many times we say, we've got to deal with racism, we've got to deal with the racist mindset and how that informs our behaviors and how that informs our public policies and how that allows for the neglect of Black and brown neighborhoods of color, how it reinforces poverty and the oppressive conditions within which people have to live. And then when people get to the point where they say, I can't take it anymore, I'm suffocating under the weight of oppression, and they react, then we turn and point the finger and say, what's wrong with you? And this is unacceptable behavior. Well, what America has done is unacceptable behavior. When are we going to hold it accountable?
Does that require, when you talk about the conversation that needs to take place and that requires change, doesn't that require mission of wrongdoing by those who may not want to admit that? People who are of goodwill, who will not address whatever implicit biases they may have and say, no, that's not me. And so... nothing changes.
Right. Yeah, it does involve an admission. And one could argue, well, the United States did make an admission and it apologized for enslavement. But that was an empty admission. And it led to no change. And it even had built into it a little clause that said, even though we apologize for enslavement and the damage it did, you cannot hold us accountable for it. So what was accomplished? The U.S. Congress actually did this admission. Most people don't even know it happened. And it's been empty. Totally empty. But now some of us do know it, and we are even more frustrated when we see yet again another assault on us and the fact that we are living in a country that is grounded in lies, a country that is unwilling to come to terms with what it has done and what it needs to do, and that it has, and this process of this narrative, this mindset, and this ignorance that we are all steeped in terms of who we are as a society, who Black folks are, who white folks are, that not being able to come to terms with that, everybody's paying a price.